Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 6th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information from the National Weather Service right here on Alaska Weather, or by calling the Alaska Weather Information Line at 1-800-472-0391. Of course, you can always find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and when you can't find what you want, feel free to email me at david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help. Here's a look at the weather that's hazardous across the region tonight, and we're going to start with the threats of the atmospheric river that is pointed from south to north right up across the Gulf of Alaska. When it hits the higher terrain and runs into cold air, it is creating a gob of snow around Prince William Sound and the higher terrain and Thompson Pass especially. As of early this morning, we had reports of over 30 to 40 inches of snow, and of course it's been snowing for a large part of the day, so once we get some of those new snow totals there, we'll share that with you on social media. But impressive amounts there as reported by the Department of Transportation, and as of midday today, the road conditions around the Richardson was closed because of several avalanches and the ongoing avalanche danger there. So we know they are working hard on that, and all due to the weather at hand. But conditions should be improving throughout the night. The problem is things are going to be warming up. So now instead of a great deal of snow, we're going to start seeing those temperatures come up and maybe add some rain to the picture, certainly around the Valdez area and the lower terrain. But some of that could mix up higher as you get into the Thompson Pass region. So keep an eye on that. As of early this afternoon, winter storm warnings were still in effect for the Thompson Pass region and the Copper River Valley there. So winter storm warnings still in effect for storm totals that could reach upwards of about 8 to 16 inches in the Copper River Valley and as much as 45 inches or more around the Thompson Pass area. So keep your watch on this. Now look further northward shows winter storm warnings are still in effect for the eastern Alaska range. Looking for storm totals there by Friday morning. So this is ongoing through Thursday and into Friday for as much as 22 inches of snow across the eastern Alaska range, generally west of the Tote Cutoff. And now we start to get into what's still coming our way and where our certainty changes a little bit. As you go a little bit further northward, winter storm watches are posted for the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range from Arctic Village westward all the way into the upper Koyukuk Valley and Bettles and eastward into the Yukon Flats around Fort Yukon itself and the Denali region. Winter storm watches are posted for these areas. That'll start tomorrow night, Thursday, and go onward into Friday morning. And storm totals there could reach on the order of 4 to about 10 inches of snow. Advisories continue at this point, at least through the early evening, for the upper Tanana Valley and the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. In these regions, we could see anywhere from 1 to about 4 inches of snow. So the red areas, ongoing, heavy snow right now. That should be improving. The yellow areas, advisories, not quite so heavy, and also improving weather later on tonight. And now the orange areas are the next places to probably get at least some sizable amounts of snow. A winter storm watch there for the Yukon Flats, the upper Koyukuk, and the Denali region, generally south of Healy, for as much as 6 to 14 inches of snow there, and as much as about 4 to 9 inches of snow for the upper Koyukuk, and probably looking at about 4 to 8 for some parts of the Yukon Flats region, or 4 to 10, I should say. So more snow's on the way. Will you get some? Well, let us know. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and once again, the really big weather maker is this south-facing channel of moisture coming up out of the Pacific. This is about 2,000 miles of meridional flow. So if you were to take a look at the globe and put your finger on Alaska and then go south 2,000 miles into the ocean, this is where all this is coming from. And you know, 2,000 miles away from Alaska right now, sounds kind of nice. Sounds kind of tropical, balmy, warm weather, lots of sun. Well, all that moisture from that area is coming right up to Alaska, running into some of the tallest peaks in North America and being wrung out as snow. Down below, though, it's not snow. In Yakutat, it's been several inches of rainfall and expected to continue. I think, if I remember right, I'd hate to get this wrong because it would be a little bit of an exaggeration, but I want to say the forecast was on the order of like 4 to 8 inches of rainfall by the time the storm total was all over. So if you were to draw like a dashed line right down the middle of this and put on the cold side over here, you'd have, what, 4+ feet of snow around Thompson Pass. And down below where it's warmer, you're getting the pure moisture out of that, the rainfall, you know, so you're talking about 4, 5, 6, 8 inches of rainfall around Yakutat. A big difference. But if you multiply that just as an easy ratio of 10, we like to say 10 to 1 for snow. That's not always true depending on how dry and cold it is, of course, but let's say a 10 to 1 ratio, 10 inches of snow per 1 inch of water. That would be 80 inches of snow in Yakutat. That's insane, but it is also perhaps one of the wettest places on the entire planet, and this is how that happens. You're watching it right here on Alaska Weather. It's pretty cool stuff. Boy, Alaska's fun. Wow, okay, so now that I've mitigated my excitement a little bit, that atmospheric river is going to wobble around a little bit here. It looks like it's going to move to, well, maybe about the northern edge of Glacier Bay, almost but not Gustavus, and just east of Thompson Pass. So things are improving for the eastern end of Prince William Sound, at least as far as that torrential part of the fire hose goes of that atmospheric river. Some of this is sneaking its way up into the eastern part of Alaska, and that is where we're getting some of those new advisories and hazardous warnings there. Out across the west, snow will also continue across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range into the upper Koyukuk and Noatak and into the Seward Peninsula. Places all the way down toward Ammonok and the Yukon Delta there, likely looking at snow. We've got several other waves of low pressure out here, but the main feature is this broad southerly fetch of moisture coming up off the Pacific. As we head into tonight, high pressure is going to try and set up across the interior because of that. Don't be surprised if you run into a little bit of fog out across southwest and maybe even across some of the central and southern inner channels there around well, Petersburg and southward toward Ketchikan and maybe even Craig there. But that's a different extension of that high pressure system. Look up to the north, we've got a weak boundary across the Brooks Range, maybe a little bit more of a breeze in that area, perhaps some blowing snow, but nothing that's probably horribly widespread. Out to the south, you can see a mixture of rain and snow across the chain and into the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. As we get ahead into Thursday, the concern is that more moisture working northward into Cook Inlet will bring some rain and perhaps freezing rain into the valleys and to the Anchorage and Kenai Peninsula regions. So pay attention to the weather if you're on the road system tomorrow. The weather could be changing enough so warm-wise that we could be looking at some freezing rain in the region. Meanwhile, rain down below around Yakutat will continue, and there could be some pockets of heavy snow up there. But again, we'll have to see how far west does that go into the Thompson Pass region. To the north, periods of snow across the Kotzebue Sound area from Wales almost to Nome, and then Kaktovik west, Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, almost to Barrow there. And then rainfall trying to sneak its way into northern parts of southeast. By and large, southern southeast looks pretty good. VFR conditions for you. And low pressure south and west of Kodiak and south of Sand Point, around 980 millibars. You can see several waves of low pressure all around the state tomorrow and Friday. Looks like snow will continue in the higher terrain. Rain still back in the forecast for Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound. Some of that may be heavy across the northern Gulf Coast, and then by Friday a better chance of rain spreading into southern southeast with snow ongoing for the northern and central interior. Some places from Eagle to Northway may sneak out with a little bit less, but it'll be very close to the Fairbanks region at this point. Let's take a look at your temperatures by tomorrow morning. Look at the heat in southeast, mid to upper 40s in some cases there. Sitka 46, Capital City right around 40 degrees, mid to upper 30s for Prince William Sound, low to mid 20s for South Central, 31 in Kodiak, the interior low to mid teens, 4 in Fort Yukon with snow, and 2 in Barrow. Teens for Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound, 16 there in Unalakleet. Looks like Bristol Bay, Dillingham, and King Salmon all in the upper teens. And the Alaska Peninsula right around the freezing point. St. Paul 28, a high of 36 by Thursday. South Central above freezing by and large in just about every location from the valley in Talkeetna all the way down toward Kodiak Island at 40. Bristol Bay in the mid-30s. Southeast mid to upper 40s, almost 50 degrees in Sitka. That's pretty warm stuff. 31 in Eagle and low teens across the North Slope. 10 in Barrow, 8 in Wainwright. Kotzebue Sound and Kotzebue itself at 22. Looks like upper 20s for Nome, 16 around Grayling and Russian Mission, And south and west, you can see readings closing in on the 40-degree mark. As you get into Friday morning, it's still going to be fairly mild. We're at or maybe even just below that freezing point, which is not good if we're still looking at rainfall across the road system in south central. Upper 20s and lower 30s there, 35 in Kodiak, upper 30s to mid 40s for southeast. Eagles at 24, Northways at 5. Fairbanks closer to 16. Bettles near 7. Ambler, you're down to 9 degrees on Friday morning. The North Slope, you're looking at single-digit temps, all above 0 though, all the way from Point Hope, or Point Lay, I should say, to Wainwright at 1, Barrow at 1, 4 around Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse if you're headed there, about 2 degrees Friday morning. 16 around Nome. Shishmara, if you're looking at 14 to start your Friday. And south and west, you'll notice a big change there along the Yukon Valley, low to mid-teens for many locations. Bethel, you're looking at about 12 as you head a little bit further south and east, and into Bristol Bay, then much warmer, low to mid-20s to about 30 around Lake Iliamna, 35 in Kodiak Island, and low to mid-30s for the Alaska Peninsula and Southwest. What happens by Friday afternoon? You're back in the mid to upper 40s for many locations, probably upper 30s to low 40s for the valley locations. Talkeetna is 42, there's 16 in Fort Yukon, 4 in Barrow, 21 around Nome, and low 20s for Bethel. Bristol Bay above freezing. The same goes for Sandpoint, Cold Bay, and Falls Pass, all close to 40 degrees, and 34 in St. Paul. So mild weather here. This is a sign of that continued southerly flow across the region. And with any precipitation falling into this, the chances are it's going to be at least a rain-snow mix and probably a better chance of rain, especially along the road system. And we'll start to see that rain cooling things down as we head into northern and eastern parts of southeast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. It looks like IFR conditions will spread in from Norton Sound into the lower and middle Yukon valleys, the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, and curl around into the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi Coast, with MVFR for many other locations in Kotzebue Sound in the northern parts of Seward Peninsula and Shishmaref. IFR lingers and is pretty packed in across parts of the Gulf of Alaska from the Copper River Valley through Prince William Sound out toward Kodiak Island and as far east as at least Yakutat, and maybe even sneaking into Glacier Bay there up around Chilkoot and White Pass as well. By the afternoon tomorrow, notice how that moisture channel kind of sneaks over a little bit on the southern end, but the northern end where it's reaching the mainland is still pretty much in the same spot. Prince William Sound, Copper River Valley, and MVFR sneaking a little bit further closer into parts of northern sections of southeast. Now the Yukon Valley, mainly MVFR, IFR conditions around the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, all the way up to Kotzebue and into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and IFR back across the coastal plain, with MVFR hit and miss across the interior, especially along the south of the Yukon Valley to the Alaska Range and the YK Delta. But once we get back into Friday, a big shift of improving conditions across the Bering. MVFR still holding for most of the interior, with IFR south of the Brooks Range into the upper Yukon, along the Kuskokwim Valley, along the Alaska Range, Prince William Sound, and again sneaking eastward just a little bit more into southeast, starting at VFR, but by the afternoon you'll see decreasing ceilings and visibility for a large part of the Panhandle. MVFR mostly for the interior, IFR for Chilkoot and White Pass all the way up toward Yakutat, and then down the outer coast with IFR still increasing across some parts of the western and southwestern areas of Alaska. Let's check your pass conditions. For Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see IFR to start leaning over toward MVFR as the day goes on. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will worsen as the day goes on tomorrow. MVFR conditions expected to develop there. And for Rainy Pass throughout your Thursday. Windy Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions. That should be the truth for Isabel Pass as well, though start at MVFR as we get into your Thursday morning and leaning over toward IFR as we go. Mentasta Pass expected to hold at least marginal levels there. A lot of snow on the ground now in that region. Tanita Pass, MVFR to IFR conditions should be the rule. And as we get into Portage Pass, also looking for at least MVFR, IFR through the afternoon, and then a much better chance heading eastward from Portage Pass to find IFR anywhere you go. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to start at IFR and maybe see some improvements throughout the day. Here's a look at the freezing levels now. Out west, not a big change there. Surface freezing line between St. Matthew and the Pribilofs. Out east, well, that big moisture channel is bringing in heat with it as well. Levels there as low as 2,000 feet around the Gulf Coast and as high as about 10,000 feet out around Craig and Klawak. A little bit further south of Haida Gwaii and Vancouver Island, you'll find the 12,000 foot freezing level. Icing potential is there anywhere from about 8 to, well, say 6,000 feet across southwest to the eastern interior and the Alcan border, above 2,000 feet around the Bering Strait communities, from Atka eastward toward Nikolsky and Unalaska all the way up toward the Pribilofs, about 4,000 feet and above to find at least some isolated moderate throughout the region. The jet stream is really our big weather player, and it always is, but right now it seems like it's a lot more clear to see the impacts of the jet stream over Alaska. High pressure shifted out across the west coast, and this has allowed a lot of drier conditions to develop around California. If you've been looking at the wildfire pictures there, around Los Angeles, this is part of their problem. But for us, a deep southerly flow, a meridional flow from south to north, and about 2,000 miles of it has latched onto warm and wet Pacific air and is just blasting that like a fire hose across the Chugach Range. And this is what's creating the snow around Thompson Pass. This is what's pushing all the snow into the Alaska Range and the Middle Tanana Valley and points east. So pretty impressive stuff. And the storm track stretches all the way out across the north and western Pacific at a 110 to 150 knots, driving that into that strong southerly flow. 9,000 feet, here's our southerlies here, anywhere from 20 to about 60 knots out over the open waters of the Gulf. A faster flow coming into the outer coast of southeast, and southerlies mainly for the interior, south and easterlies across the west coast, and kind of a messy flow out over the Bering Sea. Several areas of low pressure there, some of those just south and west of Kodiak Island. Southerlies over Kodiak Island as well. More of an easterly flow for the YK Delta, 25 to 40 knots for many across the Yukon Valley. Southerlies across the Gulf Coast, and southeasterlies for most of southeast, 50 to 55 knots there, and southerlies even over the Brooks Range. So everyone's getting in on the southerly wind. Here's a look at turbulence, anywhere from about 4,000 feet and below for areas up north, watching for considerable moderate across the middle and upper Yukon Valley, the Brooks Range in part, and then really from Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, all the way around the Horn into southeastern Alaska. But we are going to watch for some isolated severe across the northern Gulf Coast.
0 code Tango runway 32 clear for takeoff, altimeter 3021, wind call.
Winter Lake Lodge is on Finger Lake, northwest of Anchorage, about 50 minutes by bush plane. Everything at the lodge that you see has been flown in by airplane, and ordering produce and getting produce out in 20 below conditions from a 50-minute flight onto an ice-covered lake has its challenges. And we're also a checkpoint for the Iditarod dog sled race in the wintertime.
In the winter, it's a lot of preparations, especially for the Iditarod. We love the Iditarod because it's sort of a cross-state community event. At our location, it begins when the Iditarod Air Force pilots start dropping off supplies. We first receive straw, bales of straw, which we then move from our airstrip over to the checkpoint area by snow machine. After that, we sort of make a great big doggy parking lot out here. And we do that with groomers, go along the Iditarod Trail and see if there's, trees that have fallen down, any bridges that need to be made over washouts, or make sure creek ice is safe. We drill holes into the ice so that there's water for the mushers to add to the dog food. When the dogs check in, most of them spend the night here, or certainly rest here, and they'll feed their dogs.
Over the Iditarod, the lodge is packed. It's full of our full-service guests, and at the same time we also feed the 70 mushers and 10 to 15 checkers and vets, and lots of people that just come in off of the trail. I think even from the fine dining meals that we feed our guests to the food that we feed the mushers, I think everybody's kind of surprised at what they get.
Mandy will kind of spearhead that and help you guys out. She tries to have everything prepped. I think our guests notice that we are a pretty close family. I think they envy that in some ways. Some people say, oh, that's pretty cool having your kids working with you in the business. Lots of people do that, of course, come up in the business, and it's a little bit different. Everybody that works here really has to have responsibility for a lot of things. We have no prima donna chefs, no prima donna guides, no prima donna owners. So if the dog lot needs to be cleaned up, we do it. Somebody needs to meet the airplane, we do it. We unload it, we haul the recyclables, the garbage, get it out, greet the guests, haul bags, pump fuel, whatever needs to be done.
I think, people really get to see my family for who we are. We don't act differently or anything. our family really work well together to bring an incredible experience to anybody staying here at the lodge. But we also all bring something different to the table. You know, my sister with her wellness and yoga and massage, and me with baking and pastry and kind of pushing the limits to what we can do. You know, my dad is just still a kid and incredibly excited to go out and go to mountaintops every day. And my mom has had the incredible culinary career of working with some of the best chefs in the world, and has had the opportunity to befriend Julia Child and work with Jack Papan.
It's a difficult business, and it does take commitment, and you really have to be passionate about being out of town and the hardships that happen once in a while. But the rewards are great, and people are more and more seeking out a more personal interaction with their activities, their vacations, their adventures. We hope our visitors leave Winter Lake with either continued or new appreciation for Alaska. We get people who have saved their pennies for their whole lives to come experience Alaska, and they're just in awe of the lifestyle, and so we really like that.
I think just because my family's been doing this business for so long, it really doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like we're serving others. It feels just like a day-to-day living. We're pretty simple people, and we don't have extravagant things. So I think when we want to treat ourselves or relax, we kind of just sit back and enjoy the view.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge on the 6th of December, and you can see that again the Beaufort Sea is completely covered up, but with this broad easterly flow we've actually moved some of the higher concentration ice away from Barrow to Wainwright, and that's opened up a little bit of the water there. This will continue expanding westward though, and you'll notice a pretty decent filling in of the Chukchi Sea. Told you it's just a matter of time, but remember the sea surface temperatures are cooling down. They're right there at that prime spot. The one thing that's the problem with that filling in quickly is the wind. If the winds in the seas settle out, then rapid expansion of the ice should take place. In the meantime, still seeing decent growth in Kotzebue Sound and in Norton Sound. Some changes out here across the outer sound as this is expanding westward, and ice is continuing to be seen across the southwestern coast and in the arms of Cook Inlet. On to the weather in southeast now. Southeasterlies will continue across the inside passages there. Southerlies light in the Lynn Canal with 3-foot seas. Stronger gusts though down around Stevens Passage and into the Clarence Strait. Gusts to 35, even 40 knots there on a southeasterly wind, sustained at 20 to 30. The outer coast will have the stronger winds. Remember, low pressure is parked out here. We have that broad flow of moisture moving northward, and on the east and warmer side of that, we still have some gusty winds, so gales possible in many regions. 30 to 40 knots across the outside with 17 to 21-foot seas on Thursday, and then on Friday, not a lot of change there. 35 to 40 knots, seas still 18 to 20 feet. And as you get into these greener areas there, if you look at the scale, that's upwards of about 21 to 22 foot seas a little bit further offshore there. On the inside, still looking at some gusts around Stevens Passage. Southerlies light in the Lynn Canal, and southeasterlies around Clarence Strait with an 8-foot sea on Friday. For south central, easterlies strong at 35 knots inside of Prince William Sound, a 7-foot sea there. Southeasterlies outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance. Looking at 45 knots with an 18-foot sea. Not as strong as you get down toward the Barrens and outside of Resurrection Bay. 30 knots from the east and southeast, 14-foot seas there. North and easterlies coming down Cook Inlet with some higher seas west of the Barrens. Those could be upwards of 14 to 15 feet. As you get into Friday, expect a north and easterly flow, 15 to 20 knots down the Cook Inlet region. Northern Gulf, you're looking at the strongest winds just outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance. Could be some turbulence there as well as some higher seas, so watch for that. 35 to 40 knots, 18-foot seas there. Seas diminish inside of Prince William Sound. Winds stay up around 30 knots from the east and 15 to 20 knots further down the Kenai Peninsula coastline. Thursday in Bristol Bay, northeasterlies 20 to 25, 6-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast, 13-foot seas just south of Akiak down toward Chignik, and northeasterlies strong inside of Shelikof Strait with 15-foot seas expected on Thursday, down to 20 knots and 6-foot seas on Friday. An east and northeasterly flow curling around low pressure here in the western Gulf. Another surge coming northward. 11-foot seas expected across the Pacific coast and 2 to 6-foot seas across the Bering Sea, with an easterly and northeasterly flow about 15 to 20 on Friday. For the Aleutians, north and westerlies 15 to 20 knots from Adak to Atka and all the way out towards Shemya. East and northeasterly flow wrapping into low pressure a little bit further south. 20 to 25 knots. You're looking at 10 to 13-foot seas there on Thursday. For Friday, winds start coming up again. North and northwesterlies developing 30 knots. Looking at 9 to 15-foot seas in the Bering Sea coast. 12 to 13-foot seas across the Pacific coast, and westerlies developing across the western chain. 12 to 14-foot seas and 25 to 30 knots from the west. For the west coast, easterly offshore flow continues, again helping to build the ice further out west, slowly and surely in the south. 6-foot seas along the coast, 4-foot seas in the Pribilofs, and 7-foot seas around St. Matthew with an easterly wind at 20. That becomes northerly on Friday. Northwesterlies for the Pribilofs with a 6-foot sea, and northeasterlies moving off of the mainland, 20 to 25 in most areas. 4 to 7-foot seas are possible on Friday. Ice again across the Beaufort Sea coast, easterlies 10 to 15. The offshore wind continues for the Chukchi coast, but stronger winds at 20 knots with 4 to 5-foot seas, and periods of heavy to freezing spray will be possible there in the Bering Strait. 20 knots from the east with 6-foot seas on Thursday. More of a northeasterly flow on Friday at 25 knots, and 25 knots also found across most of the Chukchi Sea with 5 to 7-foot seas possible there. East and northeasterlies over the Beaufort to wrap up the week. Tonight's weather includes winter storm warnings for the Copper River Valley, winter weather advisories for the upper Tanana Valley in the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, where you could see upwards of 4 to 8 inches of snow in that region. The upper Koyukux looking at a winter storm watch, as well as many of the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range and the eastern range, including Arctic Village and the Yukon Flats, all looking for a potential of 4 to 8 inches of snow starting on Thursday and going into Friday. We're also watching for the potential of rain moving up the road system of the Kenai Peninsula and into the valleys, as well as Anchorage, and with that and cold temperatures possible, that could be a problem for freezing rain. So pay attention to the forecast around South Central. In the meantime, the fire hose of weather continues across the northern Gulf and is leaning back and forth right over Yakutat. So inches of rain will continue in that region. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.